You're scrolling through LinkedIn at 2 a.m., watching another post about someone your age who disrupted their industry and retired at 28. You
Hey
switch to
guys,
TikTok and
thanks for
see
tuning in.
influencers promoting
Today
their
we're going to talk about some
$5,000
really
morning
cool
routine.
stuff.
Then you check the news. Another housing crisis report, climate disasters, political chaos, another shooting. You close your phone feeling exhausted by infinite possibility, yet somehow completely empty. Here's what might shock you. This exact feeling was predicted over a century ago by a German mathematician who never owned a smartphone but understood your generation better than most people living today. According to recent studies, young people in the West are experiencing unprecedented levels of what researchers call existential drift. The feeling that despite having access to more information, entertainment, and opportunity than any generation in history, life lacks meaning or clear direction. Suicide rates among 18-35-year-olds have increased by 35% since 2000. Birth rates have plummeted to historic lows. Many report feeling like they're living through the end of something, but they can't name what. What if I told you this isn't a temporary crisis or generational problem, but the predictable symptom of something much larger, the twilight of Western civilization itself? This brings us to Oswald Spengler, who in 1918 published The Decline of the West, one of the most controversial and prophetic books in modern history. Writing during World War I, Spengler argued that Western civilization wasn't experiencing temporary problems. It was entering what he called its winter phase, the final season of a thousand-year cultural cycle. But here's what makes Spengler's predictions terrifying for your generation. He didn't just describe abstract historical patterns, he predicted specific phenomena you're experiencing right now. The obsession with metrics and optimization, the rise of megacities that feel alienating despite being crowded, the replacement of genuine culture with manufactured entertainment, the dominance of technology and finance over human values, the political chaos and rise of strongman leaders. Most disturbingly, what he called the metaphysical death, when intelligent people lose the will to create the next generation. Spengler saw civilizations as living organisms that move through predictable life cycles: spring, summer, autumn, and winter. Western civilization, he argued, entered its autumn around 1800 and would begin its winter around 2000. Welcome to the Winter of the West. Oswald Spengler wasn't your typical prophet of doom. Born in 1880 in Germany, he was a mathematics teacher who experienced what we'd recognize today as a massive career pivot driven by an obsession that would consume his life. Picture this. It's 1911, and Spengler is watching the Agadir crisis unfold, a diplomatic confrontation that felt like the prelude to global catastrophe. While his contemporaries saw just another political dispute, Spengler had a revelation that changed everything. He realized he was witnessing what he called a world historical moment, not just the beginning of a war, but the final phase of Western civilization itself. Spengler quit his teaching job and spent the next 7 years in his small Munich apartment, surviving on minimal income while World War I raged around him, developing a theory that would explain not just why Europe was destroying itself, but why this destruction was inevitable. What made Spengler revolutionary was his rejection of the linear view of history that everyone took for granted. Instead of seeing human progress as a straight line from barbarism to enlightenment, he saw it as cycles. Civilizations, he argued, are like living organisms. They're born, they grow, they flourish, they age, and they die, no exceptions. As Spengler wrote, cultures are organisms, and world history is their collective biography. He meant this literally. Just as a person has childhood, youth, adulthood, and old age, civilizations move through what he called seasons: spring, birth, summer, growth, autumn, maturity, and winter, decline and death. But here's where it gets personally relevant to your generation. Spengler didn't just analyze the past, he made specific predictions about the future that seem eerily accurate today. He predicted the rise of what he called megalopolises, giant cities that dominate their regions while creating rootless, cosmopolitan people who feel at home everywhere and nowhere. Think about London, New York, Toronto today. Despite being incredibly expensive and culturally dominant, young residents often describe them as lonely, artificial, and somehow spiritually empty. You can live surrounded by millions of people and still feel completely isolated. This isn't personal failure, it's what Spengler called the destiny of metropolitan man. Spengler also predicted what he called the triumph of pure intellect over the soul, when rational, technical thinking dominates while genuine culture and meaning disappear. Social media perfectly exemplifies this. Incredibly sophisticated technology optimized for engagement rather than human flourishing. He predicted the dominance of what he called money thinking, when financial considerations override all other values. Look at how this shapes your major life decisions today. Career choices based on earning potential rather than calling. Delayed relationships and families due to economic pressures. Even education marketed primarily for employment outcomes rather than intellectual development. Most chillingly, he predicted what he called the second religiousness, the turn toward alternative spirituality, wellness culture, and conspiracy theories when traditional sources of meaning lose credibility. Notice how many people in your generation are drawn to astrology, manifestation, or exotic spiritual practices while rejecting both traditional religion and scientific materialism. Spengler discovered something that most people find psychologically unbearable. Civilizations don't fail because of external enemies or natural disasters. They die from within when they lose what he called their soul, the spiritual energy that originally gave them life. And once this process begins, it can't be reversed through politics, economics, or technology. This is where Spengler's analysis becomes deeply personal for your generation. He distinguished between two phases of human society: culture and civilization. Culture represents the vibrant, creative, organic phase when a society's spiritual and creative impulses are at their peak. Civilization is the final, declining phase, what he called the thing become succeeding the thing becoming. Think about how this applies to your daily experience. How much of what you consume, your entertainment, social media, consumer choices, actually inspires you or connects you to something greater than yourself? Or does most of it leave you feeling vaguely empty, like you're going through the motions of a life that doesn't quite make sense? Spengler called this condition the metropolitan spirit, the psychological state that emerges when people become disconnected from what he called the soil of a definable landscape. He predicted that by the 21st century, most Westerners would live in what he called world cities, massive urban centers that feel cosmopolitan and sophisticated, but are actually spiritually sterile. The inhabitant of this world city becomes what Spengler called a modern neo-nomad who feels at home in any global city but is a stranger in a nearby small town. This isn't just about geography, it's about the replacement of rooted cultural identity with what we might now recognize as lifestyle branding. But here's where Spengler's analysis becomes truly disturbing. He argued that this spiritual emptiness creates a specific type of person he called the last man, someone who has lost the capacity for genuine belief, heroism, or transcendent purpose. The last man is comfortable, educated, and sophisticated, but fundamentally hollow. Does this sound like anyone you know? Or more uncomfortably, does it sound like the person you sometimes fear you're becoming? Spengler identified what he called the Faustian soul as the driving force of Western civilization, an insatiable quest for the infinite, expressed in everything from Gothic cathedrals reaching toward heaven to mathematical concepts like calculus that deal with infinity. This boundless yearning fueled centuries of exploration, scientific discovery, and cultural achievement. But Spengler argued that this Faustian spirit had exhausted its possibilities by the 20th century. The very success of Western civilization, its technological mastery, global reach, and intellectual sophistication, had drained it of the spiritual energy necessary for continued creative vitality. Spengler's final lesson isn't about inevitable doom, but about the cyclical nature of human endeavor. Civilizations rise and fall, but the human capacity for meaning, beauty, and connection continues. The winter is here, but winter isn't the end of the story. It's the season that makes spring possible. The question isn't whether you can stop the decline, but whether you can live authentically while it unfolds around you. In Spengler's words, the first act of renewal begins with a clear-sighted view of the ground upon which we stand. The twilight is here. The question is, how will you use whatever light remains?